Hey everyone, welcome to today's video. So before we talk about delivery numbers and individual companies like NIO, we need to address what's happening upstreams in the lithium carbonate price. We can see that the lithium carbonate price are rising again heading into early 2026. This isn't a speculative spike, it's driven by tighter supply, I would say, maybe delayed mining projects and also some new demand pillars from, for example, the grid scale energy storage, battery storage, and on top of that, obviously, the already growing EV market. But here's also the key point. Lithium prices don't move and hit all the EV makers equally. The real risk isn't in the lithium price itself, it's the lithium exposure per kilowatt hour of battery capacity. We will unpack that later, but some battery chemistries require significantly more lithium to store the same amount of energy. That means that when the lithium prices rise, costs don't move linearly. They get amplified through, let's say, contracts, the supply chain bottlenecks, and risk premiums. So the question for 2026 isn't are lithium prices rising? The question would be who is structurally more exposed and who has the ability to absorb or smoothen that volatility. And with that framework in mind, let's have a look at the impacts of the battery cost and also what it means for NIO's delivery outlook in Q1 of 2026. So I know that David in the comment section asked me how I arrived at these numbers when it comes to, let's say, slightly weaker Q1 delivery numbers, as some of you have seen. 34,000 deliveries in January, 32,000 in February, and 36,000 in March, which is significantly lower than Q4 of 2025. And you can see here that in Q4 of 2025, NIO delivered roughly 124,000 cars, whereas in, let's say, Q1 of 2026, I'm expecting 102,000 cars. If you look at this headline here from CNEV News, you can see that CPCA estimates China January new electric vehicle retail at around 800,000, which is roughly 7.5% up year on year. But it's significantly down, 40% sequentially from Q4 of 2025. Traditionally, we know that Q4 is always really strong and people put the orders in Q4 and maybe Q1 is slightly slower. In addition to that, we know that the Chinese New Year is from the 17th of February through the 3rd of March. And usually the first week after, the end of the holidays, it's also quite slow in the logistics. There's some hiccups and so on. So I would say that February, maybe I should still revise the number significantly more than I already have done. Again, if you look at the pure numbers here, you can see that February number is at 32,000. Parts of me wants to lower that number to, let's say, closer to 27,000 maybe, and even lower the January number to 34. But despite us knowing that Q4 is strong and Q1 is always weaker, especially adding to it the Chinese New Year, this time in late February, we still know that on the 18th of January, NIO announced that they managed to reach 50,000 ES8 sales, which was roughly 10,000 more than the previous milestone at 40,000. And that milestone was reached, I believe, on the 29th or 30th of December. So within the first 3 weeks of the year, they managed to sell additionally 10,000 new ES8s. Maybe they could sell additionally, 5,000 to 7,000 more ES8s in the remaining days of January, which are 12, 13 more days since the 18th. And we could see 15, 16, maybe even 17,000 ES8 deliveries only in January, right? And with that, then that's why I kind of didn't reduce my delivery number expectations in January much further than 34. I mean, if I wouldn't know about the strong demand for ES8, maybe I would have lowered my January delivery numbers to around 30,000 and February to 26. But since the ES8 seems to be really, really nice demand, I still think that this is good. And remember, guys, that at the end of the day, we are still looking at 140, 150% year over year increase in expected January sales. I mean, last January we had below 14,000. Even if we would get 30,000, that is 120% year over year increase. So, let's not pretend that these are bad numbers. Again, I understand that compared to Q4, these are bad numbers. But come on, guys, look at this again headline. It's roughly 40% down compared to Q4 deliveries across the entire market. So you could argue that this year NIO is stronger in relative to the competition. For example, if you look at weekly delivery numbers like that we had for 2025, right? If you look at early in 2025, NIO was significantly weaker than the likes of, Xpeng and Li Auto, and of course, I mean, BYD is in a different league. But as the year went on, NIO all of a sudden started to catch up to them. And although we stopped getting the weekly delivery numbers somewhere in October, November, if you look at the monthly delivery numbers, you'll see this trend, right? I mean, look at the monthly delivery numbers in 2025. In January, NIO delivered 13,000, Xpeng delivered 30,000, again, January 25, and Li Auto basically 30,000. February, 13,000 for NIO again, Xpeng and Li Auto just about 30,000. March, NIO was at 15, they were at 33 and 36. But as time went on, and if you look at now in November, all of a sudden, in December and November, for example, in December, NIO delivered 48,000, Xpeng delivered 37,000, and Li Auto 44. So I understand that compared to January last year, NIO looks to be stronger positioned in the market. So I would expect that NIO has a, like, let's say if the entire market is down 40%, maybe NIO would be this time down 20 to 30%. So like they would outperform market despite the entire Q1 delivery being 40% down compared to Q4. But considering all of these dynamics, the ES8 strong deliveries, the weak traditional Q1 compared to Q4, the Chinese New Year in January, I would argue that these numbers at least is what I'm gonna stick with for the moment. 34 in January, 32 in February, and 36 in March. And this would again boil down to around 102,000, which I'm very, very happy about. I would project a net loss at around 100 million or so for this Q1 of 2026. In a few weeks, we should have the Q4 numbers. Really, really looking forward to that. Might potentially be, actually profitable. And again, we know that in Q3, they will cash flow positive. So at the end of the day, we all know that they are moving in the right direction. Now let's have a look at let's say, one of the main topics of this video, which is the lithium carbonate price. And we know that it's been going up again. Again, it's not to the same extent of like 600-700% increase in 2022, 2023 compared to the previous lows. But we are now at around 170,000, which is like 2.5 times, let's say, more expensive than, the summer lows of 2020, 2025. I would argue that the lithium carbonate price will hit different OEMs differently. So the likes of BYD, who are totally vertically integrated, will be affected less. The likes of Volvo, which are heavily relying on NMC batteries, are probably going to be more affected. Tesla and NIO, I would say, in between. Tesla, because a lot of their sales are in the LFP side, and we know, according to this, you can see here that the NCM batteries are more affected per, let's say, unit sold than the LFP batteries. So if you're an OEM like Tesla that are selling more LFP cells, you're going to be affected less. Now, per kilowatt hour is important, and you can see that although an NCM battery needs 50% more lithium carbonate than LFP, once you add to it, like, the supply chain amplifications, the contracts, the bottlenecks, the risk premiums, maybe per kilowatt hour, the NCM batteries will have a premium of $5 to $8 due to the latest spike in the lithium carbonate price, whereas the LFP would be like $1 to $2, maybe $3 increase in kilowatt hours. So for a 100 pack battery, the LFP battery would be like between 100 to 300, maybe $400 more expensive. But when it comes to the NCM, if you assume a 100 kilowatt hour battery, it's almost $1,000 per car. And probably this will be more once it's like goes to the sales price. I think these prices are for the cost of goods sold. And if you look at the outgoing price to the customer, it's probably significantly more, maybe $2,000 to $3,000 or even $4,000 more. At the end of the day, it's still like for a car that like Model Y at, let's say, if you assume a Model Y spec at $50,000 with the NCM battery, even if it's like $3,000 more, that's only 6% of the price of the car. So it's not like, huge in terms of, it's not going to make or break companies, but this will affect some companies. When it comes to NIO though, it's really interesting because I think the battery swap infrastructure will be making them able to like dilute this price hike. So they will like, amortize it, and the depreciation cost will be like maybe divided in many years in the future. And the customers might opt more to buy the car without the battery as they allow. So I think like for NIO, it's less, let's say, difficult times for NIO than, for example, someone like Volvo, right? At the end of the day, when it comes to NIO, I'm really, really happy and intrigued to look at how the Q1 delivery numbers look like, especially the first month in January. And anything around 30,000, I'm quite happy with it. I would hope to see 32 to 34,000 deliveries in January, but even 30,000, I would be really, really happy. When it comes to the stock price and the market capitalization, honestly, I don't know. Like, I'm not an expert here, but I have no idea why this company is traded this low. Tesla being like 1.4, 1.5 trillion US dollar. And you know, you've seen all this about FSD. Like Elon Musk again is like super bullish on FSD. But guys, a simple check, like if you're driving a car on the highway and all of a sudden there's a snowstorm, no matter how much, like if you have a 10 or 20 cameras in front, they combined won't be able to see that much ahead of the car, because the snow and the fog physically limits the camera. But a radar sees through this fog, a radar sees through the snow. So if you buy a car, why would you buy a car? Let's say the Tesla FSD is much better than everyone else in a perfect weather scenario. But the moment the weather changes, or even not even weather change, like even if small speck of dust blocks the important camera angle, you're essentially in trouble, right? But when it comes to radar, it doesn't matter. It's not affected by, blocked sensors or like weather, like snow, like fog, like rain. And also object detection 200-300 meters ahead of you could be really, really improved. And in addition to that, a radar equipped car also have vision. So there's a redundancy in the system. So no matter how you look at it, I'm not one of those that for one buys this like Tesla FSD premium. I think Tesla is utterly overpriced, and I don't agree with the market capitalization difference between these companies. I think if Tesla is valued at 1.5 trillion, NIO at the minimum would be a 100 billion company. It's a 10x from here. Like if you look at it frankly, right, at the bare minimum. So anyways, this was just an update on NIO stock and the recent price hike in lithium carbonate price. And I would like to urge you to subscribe to the channel to help me grow a bit faster, and I would really appreciate it. And comment also in the comment section if you think that Tesla is superiorly overpriced and NIO is undervalued, or what are your views in the lithium carbonate price hike that we have seen recently. Thanks for your time and see you in the next one.